I'm on, okay. Good morning.
Good morning, Robert.
Happy 4th of July week, okay, and happy freedom. The word freedom has been working in my head all week. It's been very, very interesting. And Madeline had to listen to all my theories, okay? And it was kind of interesting, you know, we take certain words for granted and we really don't look at them. So freedom from what? Okay? And if you go back and look at the original incorporating documents of the United States, it uses the word inalienable rights and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody there? So inalienable, and I had to look it up, and it says basically there is no ownership. In other words, I can't transfer ownership of my state of being to somebody else. You've got it, you're stuck with it, it's yours because you're a human being. God gave it to you, nobody else gave it to you. So life, the ability to pursue life, liberty to be who you are, and you're ready, pursuit of happiness, not a right or guarantee of happiness. And that's what I want to talk about today, is happiness and joy and bliss, lifestyle that works, and life free of problems. Anybody familiar with problems and challenges? So that's what a lot of us have been looking for. So it's really kind of fascinating to me to look at the definitions of words. And in looking at definitions, okay, if you look at the word inalienable, innate, it means it's already within you. And that's what we keep saying is you are, as a human being in this world, you are inalienable the right to life because you are a child of God. And actually, you're not just a child of God, you are God expressing itself in this universe. So when it says the pursuit of happiness, we are saying God is within us, so we are creative beings. Everybody there? And we create our world around us. Now, because we don't know that we're creating our world doesn't make any difference. It's kind of like the law of gravity. Anybody familiar with the law of gravity? In other words, we're here, and I'm sitting on this stool, and I'm not going anywhere. Now, it's interesting because the law of gravity is equally applied to all people, under all conditions, no matter where you are on the face of the earth. I can remember being in Australia. And you know what? They had gravity in Australia. Yeah, we don't even think about it. So that is a state of being that we are in completely without even knowing it, without even being aware of it. And the law of gravity doesn't show favorites. It doesn't not work. One of the more difficult metaphors I can use is if you've got a 2 or 3 year old teetering on the top of a big building on the edge, okay, does gravity stop just because the child might fall? The answer is no, because it's equally applied under all conditions to all people, and everybody has the right to use that innately without even thinking about it. So as a child of God, you are a creative being creating everything around us. And the law of attraction says, what I think about, I create. Everybody there? Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing. I have some creations I'm not happy about. Anybody agree? And what's fascinating is then I can use that creative ability to change that if I choose to and I know how to. Now, it's very interesting to me that the language of God, as far as we know, is love. Bible says that one of the keys we're all looking for is peace. And I believe that anybody agree you'd like to be peaceful. And peaceful implies for me plenty of food to eat, not an overabundance, a safe environment around me, enough resources to feel good about myself and do what I want to do when I want to do it, friends and family around me that care and are part of my community, and we can go on and do some other things. But that's peace. And in Psalm, this famous psalm, okay, it's Psalm 26:3. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee. Which means what? It's very clear, okay? But what it says is, thou will keep him in perfect peace. So thou will keep him in perfect surroundings, perfect weight, hopefully, perfect all of these things if I keep my mind stayed on thee. And it's kind of fascinating that mind then, that to me implies love. Okay? So the language of God or language of the universe is love. And it's, again, going into the Bible, and I'm going to put my glasses on. Going into the Bible, again, if you go into what Jesus has been saying, and I'll just happen to look this up. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. So Jesus is saying, he was asked by the Pharisees, what is the most important commandment? That's what he came up with. So the key to life that everybody's looking for is staying stayed on God. Now, if you look at many of the world religions into other religions rather than our Christian religion, similar type philosophy of worshiping spirit, worshiping God, worshiping the universal spirit, the great white spirit, if you will, whatever the Native Americans talked about. So there is a great spirit that is around us, in us, and through us. And all Jesus was saying was a modern, practical application to make life work. So I'm going to say it again. You ready? And he was asked again, which commandment is best? And he said, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. And this is the first commandment. Got it? Then it goes on and says, and the second is this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is no other commandment. So in these two short verses is, to me, one of the keys to life. Now, who's our neighbor? Everybody. Everybody we interact with. Frankly, everybody we see on TV. Everybody we hear about is in our scope of awareness. And it says, thou shalt love thy neighbor. It doesn't say we're going to get angry and do all that stuff. Anybody familiar with that stuff? Okay, and all I have to do is turn the TV on to show what stuff is. So really simple. I picked up where to go. Okay. Anyway, the great White Eagle is it's very interesting. White Eagle is a spiritual teacher that existed in the.
It was on. It's under that deal there. Understand.
Under? There it is. Okay. This is I found this, by the way. Remember, we moved the libraries around. So I just happened to find this. And it was gifted to me a while ago. And here, it's simple. You ready? This is White Eagle, a Native American spiritual teacher, saying, are you ready? This is the victor. How to be a victor. Man is spirit, or human is spirit. Everybody there? This is all that man needs to know. There isn't anything else to know. And spirit is triumphant over matter under all conditions. Yep. Period. Okay? So here we have Jesus saying it, Native Americans saying it. You go into almost any scripture in any part of the world, and they will say that there's a spirit for good in the universe. It's our job to dwell in the awareness of that spirit and not get on the other side of that thing. So it says, again, I'm going to say, I hate to keep back on this. I've really been looking at this because I keep thinking, how can anybody think that way? What can they do? And then all of a sudden I remember, and the second of this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Okay? So, what is the key to learning to be happy and be free? So, if this makes sense, it's logical to me. Because love and the idea of loving my neighbor and staying in love and happiness and joy all the time is the key to freedom. I honestly believe freedom includes, I don't want to use the word lack, but freedom from lack, freedom from disease, freedom from retribution, if you will, and all those freedoms that we take for granted, how do they come to us? And if I'm holding hate and anger with somebody else, what is coming back to me? It ain't freedom. Okay, so here we are, one of the greatest nations in the history of the world, divided because we don't like what somebody says. And the great commandment from many, many spiritual places is, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, there's an implication there. You ready? It says, love thy neighbor as thyself. So we have to love thyself first. You got it? And I can be my biggest critic, yes? Okay? No, I'm not going to go there. But anyway, and the idea behind this whole thing is, how do I presence myself in the world that I'm free and that life works for me? And our culture has created this culture of anger, gossip, and all the other negative sides of life, and we get sucked over there. I don't know about you, but I get sucked over there. All I have to do is turn the TV on and watch somebody saying something, and I'm right in there. Okay, so the idea behind it, you have to know what's going on. I agree with that. But the idea is to change it into love. One of the keys that I first learned when I got involved in Unity is see the Christ in everybody. Now, what that means to me is see God's Spirit within everybody. God is everybody. So when I look at anybody and I feel other than love, what am I creating? I'm creating whatever it is on the negative side of life. It's kind of interesting to me. It's I remember Ram Dass, God bless him. And those who don't know Ram Dass, he was a psychologist who studied Hinduism in India and got his new name Ram Dass, and then came back here and was as a teacher. Still alive, I understand, in Hawaii. And in listening or being in one of his workshops years ago, he talked about his puja table. Now, a puja table is a table that you have set aside for God. Everybody there? And he has pictures of his saints and pictures of good things in his life. And he had a problem with one of our presidents way back then. So guess what he did? He put a picture of the person he was upset with on his holy table. And every morning he would say, "Good morning, Saint. Good morning, Babaji. Good morning, Mr. Nixon." Okay? And what was he doing? He was seeing the Christ and knowing that love is the universal language that I am here to express. Now, I can say, well, I don't like the way things are. Okay? I'm a victim. Okay, which is, see, psychologically, we project, anytime we have a problem, we project that problem out of ourselves to somebody else. That's why our friends that create problems for us are blessings, because they're telling us exactly what we have to work on. Okay, so in that process, if I'm showing love, what I'm doing is cleaning up my own self. Okay, if that makes any sense. So freedom, what is freedom? Freedom is joy, peace, happiness. What are some other things? Wealth?
Peace. No, you said peace.
What?
Peace, you said peace.
Peace, yeah, peace. Happy family relationships. Okay?
Yes.
Now, some relationships we're not going to change. And the thing to do is heal it within us. Okay? And I'm still working on some people from the past. Do you ever notice how when you really declare, I want to get clear, all of a sudden all this old junk starts coming up? It's called detoxifying. Okay? It really is. And that's one of the issues on the spiritual path is when I'm working toward that oneness or awakening and being in the silence, sometimes these things come to us. So if I really want freedom, the idea is to stay centered in God. The Practical Metaphysics, the folks that are reading this book is wonderful. Again, we need to get some more copies of it. But and I just happened to read. Are you ready? It says, the power to do all the mighty things that we dream of doing is faith. The power to do mighty things, the eternal flow of life and guidance and substance, is always in you. Always. Because this is the activity of God that's centered in you. See, again, Thomas Troward, the great spiritual teacher, said, God is always for growth and expansion. So we as human beings are always for growth and expansion. Do you ever notice once you get somewhere, you're not satisfied, you want to go somewhere else? You know, and I can remember, this is years ago, if I ever earned, let's say, $10,000 a month, a year, back then, and it was like, once you got there, no, I want 50, or I want 20. And so anytime we reach a plateau, we're always ready for the next one, which is Spirit working through us. Okay, now it works the other way. See, if we dwell on the negative side of things and see all the problems, we keep creating more problems, so we keep going to lower and lower levels. Do you ever notice when you're angry, you get angrier sometimes? Okay, and when you get angry, all that junk shows up. That's because we are always incremental in our thoughts and our work. So I'm asking us together to know that Spirit is within us, and we're going to build that church down the road. And anybody ever have doubts? Yeah, that happens. But the idea is we together can create wonderful things. Okay? Now, there's some more here. The power is always present. Substance, guidance, direction is always present. All the love in the universe is always present to you and in you. So if you can get this picture that you are the center of the universe, and in the silence and the stillness, you connect with that. Okay? You have a direct connection with Spirit. Okay, now the problem is we have convinced ourselves we don't. So then it goes on and says, the need then is not to get God to bring himself into our experience, but for us to practice the present instead of practicing the absence. In other words, if we practice the absence of God, we get the absence of God. If we practice the presence of God, we get the presence of God and all the gifts that come with that. Isn't that an interesting idea? Okay? So, freedom. What is freedom? So I'm asking that. Because freedom is, it's a different ballgame for everybody. But basically, the ability to express myself is important. And the ability to express myself without retribution. Yes, it's one of the foundations of our United States work. Okay? And would you agree freedom of speech is under assault now? But it isn't, because we still get a chance to speak. So what am I speaking to myself is the big issue. So I'm a child of God, created in the image and the likeness of God. I have a direct line. If you want to say I'm a direct line to Spirit, and Spirit is around me, in me, through me. And thank you, Father, Mother God, for the joy that I live in. Okay? Anybody like to join me in that conversation? Because that's freedom. That's real life freedom. Okay? I don't know what else to say. I love you.
I'll say something. I was just thinking, you were talking about the internal feeling of freedom.
Yeah.
And the people that have been presented to us throughout history are gifted to us, that like Nelson Mandela, who had no external freedom.
No.
And yet he
was free.
Still knew that he was beloved of the beloved. And when he did get external freedom, it just started flowing
It
out.
blossomed out into a whole new nation.
So somehow the external circumstances are not the definition.
Perfect. If you take a look at, I'm trying to remember his name. He was in the Nazi prison camps.
Oh, yes.
And he's bigger. Hans Stahl, I'll tell you. And he talked about, he watched people die when they lost hope.
Mm-hmm.
And others thrived when they stayed in spirit, in belief. There's also stories from the Vietnam POWs, the ones that lived a normal life in their brain, survived. I don't know whether you've ever heard the story about the guy who was a golfer, who was in prison for 5 years and played around the golf in his mind every day, and came back and shot a subpar round, because he had already been there. So thank you for that. So what are we practicing? What are we imagining? Where are we going? What are we doing? And in my world, I really, really want to stay in the presence. So thank you. I love you. And thank you for being in the presence with us.
Thank you, Robert.
Blessing.